Hi guys, welcome to The Social Block, the podcast where we explore the intersection between blockchain technology and society. As always, today we'll be exploring how this new technology can change our lives as individuals, our institutions, our culture, and pretty much everything on the way to making us a more empowered and equitable society. We have a really special episode for you today. It's all about the future, and it's not necessarily got as much blockchain in it as we usually do, but it's all about how blockchain can underpin what we'll be living in the future with its ability to give us really self-sovereignty and true ownership of our assets. So we talk a lot about what value will be in the future of the world, a lot about AR, VR, AI. You will see me get my ass completely owned in a discussion about can AI have ideas. Very proud of leaving that in there for you guys to see. I think it's important for everyone to have it in mind. We have a very special guest with us today. In the more popular sphere, he's known as Mr. Metaverse. It's Aragorn Meulendijks. Hi, Aragorn. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great,
Awesome.
As every day. I mean, once you find your purpose in life and your passion becomes your work, then every day is a great day.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's definitely true, especially when you're working for yourself in that respect. So I always try to start off for listeners with asking my guests to tell us a little bit about themselves, about what they do, just so they have the context.
Well, my name is Aragorn. I usually, when I do my own job, meaning either consulting, which usually ends up in doing kind of presentations or workshops or keynotes, which is the main bulk of my work, in the public, I never introduce myself. But for podcasts, because it's not about me. And I guess that is kind of an introduction. So on the one hand, I love being on stage and I love talking about the future that I envision. And I'll get to that in a second. Mm-hmm. And I love the attention. Not going to lie about that. I love being on stage, but it's not really about me. It's about the story I have to tell. And the story I have to tell is basically my vision on the future. And so what I do now is I'm a futurist, and that's the title other people have given me. And I've just happily adopted it, even though we're living in a time where the word futurist is used by a lot of people that have no idea what they're doing. And so not everybody has positive connotations with that title. My own background is I studied history. Then I dropped out because in university, after several years, I felt I was not actually attributing anything useful to society or my own life. Looking back now, I realized that a lot of that probably had to do with my ADHD and my kind of neurodivergence, where I just wasn't a person that's capable of being in the books really long and studying on my own all the time just to do tests. My kind of interest can change very rapidly, although my interest right now seems to be very stable, but that's mostly, I think, due to the field that I'm focusing on is very broad and the developments are very fast. So there is something new to basically focus on every week.
It just feeds the ADHD.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God.
But I studied history. I got a Commodore 64 in 1989, I think, which was my first computer. And my mother changed my life by giving me that computer. She bought it from my next door neighbor who got a new computer. And my next door neighbor's son is still my best friend till this very day, or one of my best friends and my oldest friend. And he's a big gamer and he's also in technology. And my entire life I've been focused on that. So when I dropped out of university, I got a job in IT. And that job in IT initially was sales of IT technology and IT services. And then I got hired or recruited, I should say, by initially Oracle, which is, of course, one of the biggest IT companies in the world. And then subsequently, both Google and LinkedIn tried to recruit me. And LinkedIn eventually was successful. And so I went to work for LinkedIn for several years, and I was responsible for international accounts. And I was helping all these massive corporates around the world with their social selling strategies and their social hiring strategies. So how do you use social media, specifically LinkedIn, of course, to reach your target audience and hire them? Then in 2016, I kind of came back to the Netherlands to be closer to my family, and I tried I've tried a lot of things working with different entrepreneurs in different kind of fields, but always around sales and technology. Ultimately, I realized I had to just work for myself, because working for other people was just something that I struggled with all the time, because I have my own ideas and I have my own way of doing things. And that can be rather extreme compared to other people, probably again because of my neurodivergence. But ultimately, after trying to start or build an online academy for Unreal Engine developers, so that's to do with the development of 3D worlds, environments, assets, I went to work for a Web3 company, Metaverse Web3 startup, as a head of marketing. And this is how I met Nicola, who's your colleague. He was my intern, the first intern I hired. And we worked there together in the marketing team.
Oh gosh, did we poach him from you?
Yeah, yes,
Oops,
yes.
Sorry. He's great. Thank you.
And then I left that company because of a difference of a vision, I would say, with the CEO that originally hired me. He was taking a very conservative approach to the whole thing, where I have a very kind of forward-looking approach. But everybody, including our clients, kept asking me, Aragorn, can you come and do a talk? Can you tell us about, Web3 and why it's important and how it ties into the metaverse and what's going to happen in the future? So I was doing that a lot. And several years back, I was actually a public speaking coach. And back in high school, I was already always on stage, always talking. And everybody said, Aragorn, you're going to be a public speaker. But then 2 decades passed and I didn't really have a topic to be a public speaker about. So I just did, the wedding speeches and stuff like that. And then when I finally... Yeah, but then when I got into Web3 and the metaverse, I finally found this topic of which I can talk always, and I know a lot about it. And because of my background in IT, I had the knowledge of the basic technologies, and because of my studying history, I had a very profound understanding of historical trends and trajectories of how society functions, the democracies function, a lot of contextual general knowledge. And that all seemed to tie into this. And so I came to this point where everybody was always asking me, Aragorn, what's going to happen right now? Because they appreciate my opinion. And so when I left the startup, the obvious thing to do seemed to start a business where I just focus on that. And so for the last 2 years, I've basically, or a year and a half now, I've just exclusively full-time focused on what are the technological developments going on and how will these impact the world that we live in, the economies that we live in, the societies that we live in, our daily life. And I specifically look at technologies that have to do with how we interact with the world, reality, and each other. So that means virtual reality, because it changes how we perceive the reality around us, augmented reality, because that overlaps realities on top of our reality, our digital realities. I look at Web3 because it changes the interactions and transactions between humans in a very profound way, really changing how our economies function, I think, over time, and how the role of money and value. And then finally, of course, artificial intelligence, because from the get-go, I've always said that once artificial intelligence reaches a certain level of prominence or capabilities, it would revolutionize everything. And this is something that I kind of first picked up on in 2014 when I was introduced to the whole idea of our road to super intelligence by Tim Urban on his online blog, Wait But Why. And that then got me into reading Ray Kurzweil's The Singularity is Near. So I'm a singularitarian, for those who know what that is. I believe that technology, and I don't just believe this like it's a religion, because a lot of people say, Ray Kurzweil is almost like a technology cultist, even though he works as head of engineering at Google. But I believe it because if I look at my own knowledge and I look at history, I don't need to know particularly how technology works, although I have very good understanding of a lot of the AI models and how they work in principle. I don't need to know that because I can identify trends. And once you can identify trends, looking at the future becomes something like doing a forecast for the weather. You can't be 100% certain it's going to rain tomorrow, but you can definitely say whether that probability is 68% or 23%. And so being a generalist and having that kind of background, that's what I do now. So that was a very long introduction.
It was, but it's good to have like a good idea of who the person is and like what they actually do. So you kind of ended on that, like, so looking into the future. First of all, I really like that you actually went from studying the past into looking into the future. I think that's super cool. History major turns futurist. Anyway, that was a side note. So I guess I want to ask specifically about what your vision of the future is for our listeners. I actually initially saw one of Aragorn's talks. My colleague Nicola sent it to me, and it was absolute fire. I'm going to link it in the description because I just think you guys would benefit from actually watching it if you're also watching this episode. And then I also read a little bit about like the things you were talking about, and I got the feeling that your vision of the future is based on like three main pillars of technology. So we've got the AR, VR situation, AI, and then there's blockchain, Web3, NFTs, Metaverse in its third little category. So can you like tell us, how do you see the future?
Yes. Okay. So to understand my view of the future, it's very important to understand the core belief of my vision on how technology and humanity are related. What's the relationship between them? And so if you look at human history, humanity has been around for millions of years, but in our current form, let's say our current version, our current software version, and
humanity 2.0.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's 2.0 yet, but Homo sapiens. I would actually I would argue that maybe it's humanity 1.0. Homo sapiens, the first version of us that was, at least that we know of course, because I saw a documentary on Homo and a lady in Africa who apparently had religion and philosophical thought 200,000 years earlier. But that's super interesting. Go check it out. But we know that humanity in its current form has been around for 200,000 years. We started to transition from hunter-gatherers to civilization as we know it today, living together in communities, farming about 12,000 years ago. But it's only in the last 250 years that basically all of technology has been invented and developed. Let's say at least 99.99%. I mean, the wheel was invented 4,000 years ago after we already did agriculture for 6,000 years without it, which is crazy if you think about it. 1,500 years ago, we started to melt iron. But apart from those, major developments and the invention of how we could use fire, 99.9% of all technologies in the last 250 years. And most people don't really realize this because the lifespan of a human is about 80 years. So we have a very short experience timeline and memory. And 2 generations down the line, we don't really understand anymore how the lives of our great-grandparents actually were. It's really hard to imagine. But if you think about it, 100 years ago, right, cars were just being introduced. There was probably only maybe a couple 100,000 cars around the world. And today we have billions of them. The whole idea of mobile telephony, all of this was, crazy. The internet, nobody had even thought of that yet. So technology is going very rapidly. Technology is developing along an exponential path, right? Where humanity is still on an evolutionary, biological, organic path that is linear. We upgrade very slowly. The only big changes that we've gone through is that we've started to use our brains in different ways. And because of neuroplasticity, we develop our brains differently throughout our lifetime, making us capable of far more advanced abstract thought, for example, compared to our, ancestors from like 100,000 years ago. Once you know that, then it becomes apparent that technology is increasingly changing very rapidly, and that trajectory is accelerating. 100 years ago, we didn't have, and technologies that we have today, like the internet. And so over the next few years, we're going to see that exponential growth path continue. And exponential growth is very explosive. So what we'll see is a complete reshaping of the world as we know it. And I think that several technologies, as you already pointed out, will be very essential there. On the one hand, we're seeing that around the world are centralized systems, which we have developed over the last 150 years mostly, are starting to fail us. Because since the advent of the internet, these centralized systems and structures, they don't function very well anymore because they're centralized, but the people using them are no longer centralized in the way they think and interact. Because if you're in the Netherlands, like me, and you can have a podcast recording with somebody, so that's no longer centralized. You're in a different country than me, completely different country, completely, different part of the world. And yet we're talking and we're sharing ideas, not through letters, because we're doing scientific research, but in real time. And this happens all the time everywhere. And so the problem is that we have a lot of these centralized systems, whether they be financial systems, governmental systems, that are trying to operate still like they did 100 years ago, but they are tailored towards a situation of 100 years ago and 1,000 years before that, when people didn't have access to the internet, for example. Whereas today, that is a totally different situation. Now, on top of that, and the Bitcoin maxis, etc., and the Web3 lovers will love to go into a deep discussion about how our financial system is, of course, failing, which I think is true. The financial system is absolutely failing because over the last 50 years, we've made some very bad decisions. For example, releasing the gold standard, Nixon releasing the gold standard. But it doesn't really matter because those are just different signals that show that the systems that we've been using are now at the end of their life cycle and no longer they're no longer the right systems for the world that we live in. So we have Web3, which I think will be essential, basically decentralized technologies for transactions to simplify it. But they're also essential because we see an increasingly transition to the virtual world, right? The internet rose at the end of the 90s. Then we started and we had 3D gaming initially, but we started to build these digital worlds, right? And these digital worlds are not the same kind of reality as the physical reality around us, but they are increasingly becoming a dominant part of our lives. And some parts of them are becoming increasingly realistic. And this trajectory is not going to change. Yeah, go on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're talking about the virtual worlds and everything, and we've got the technology coming out now, like Apple just released its Vision Pro and everything. And, it's very advanced compared to, Meta's previous versions, what we had with Oculus. It's a little bit smaller, blah, blah, blah. All that kind of stuff. You guys can read up on the specs and everything. But do you think that we're going to live in a more virtual world? Like, how do you see things developing from the specifically augmented reality and virtual reality idea? Like, in that sense, like, how do you think the world is literally going to look in terms of the way we're developing our augmented and virtual reality technology right now?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. So again, let's look at the recent past, right? In 1999, there was no online gaming, basically. I mean, in 1999, I went online for the first time with a dial-up modem to play Duke Nukem 3D, and it wasn't really the internet. It was me against my friend who was playing from his father's computer. That was 1999. That's 20 years ago. Well, 24 years ago, 25, right? Today, everybody's online gaming in the train, in the metro. Not everybody is a gamer, but all of us are instantly connected to each other all the time. And part of our lives take place in a digital realm, right? That is a fact. In fact, the statistics show that children between 9 and 19 spend an average of 8 hours a week in virtual worlds with virtual assets, virtual avatars, virtual fashion, creating virtual worlds or things or games and trading them, etc. So it is 100% clear that we're seeing a massive change in how we spend our time and where we spend our time and in what reality we spend our mental presence, so to speak. And that trend's not going to change because technology is just getting better. The speed at which we're able to interact and transact data is getting faster. And the realism of the environments that we live in and the complexity of them is growing increasingly. And now we're also at the point where we're seeing this kind of self-accelerating development where on the one hand we're increasingly in digital worlds and on the other hand we created technology to allow us to have value in those worlds, right? Web3 and decentralized technologies allow us to, for the first time, have virtual worlds where the assets are not owned by the studios that made them and our activities and all of that are not subject only to their rules and regulations, but we can create these virtual worlds where we can have
value.
Property, where we can have value and property and exchange it just like in the real world. Yeah.
Do you know something that I find really specific when you like compare the AR, VR, like the tech that everybody is like really excited about. And then you've got the AI that everybody's also both afraid of, I guess, and excited about. But like that third element of the Web3, the creation of self-sovereignty, ownership, and the ability to actually own stuff. I had this really, I think in a couple episodes ago, I was talking to Eric Weiner from Near, and he was just like, I feel like as a society, we collectively forgot what it actually means to own stuff, because we got used to like the subscription model and, you know, just kind of hopping online to check something if it's still there just because we subscribe to it. That's not ownership. Neither is owning, I don't know, items in League of Legends, because you don't own those assets. You can't like keep them in any way if the game goes down. Either way. So I feel like the reason people, like, I feel like blockchain isn't as popular as AR, VR, and AI in like daily conversation. It's still a lot more niche. It's just because the concept that it brings to this future that we're talking about is a little bit more abstract. It's not as physically tangible as what's going on with AR and VR, which is like a very much in your face, like the physical world is changing because of the way we're augmenting it or moving into virtual worlds. And then with AI, everyone is just like, oh, what will I do? What about my job? Blah, blah, blah. But then with blockchain, they're just kind of like, oh, you know, this doesn't matter. And I'm just like, this is the most important part. This is the thing that can underpin the other two, because without it, you know, we're just basically strengthening the same centralized, unchecked centralization. I always say unchecked because people don't realize, the mass of people don't really know that, you know, they're operating under some kind of centralized system. They don't really think about their Google Drive, their accounts on Meta and everything being anything centralized. They don't think, but it's abstract. So we just kind of forget about it. And I don't know if you agree with that like it's the least popular of the three, but yeah, that's like my very strong feeling on that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I think you're definitely right. It is the least popular of the three. And the reason for that is that it is the less tangible, right? The thing with Web3 is that you can't really see it. Exactly. You can't really see it and you can't really experience it, because what you experience at the end of the day is not very different from what you experience today in the daily life. Because if I send money from my bank account to your bank account, that doesn't feel, in essence, it doesn't feel very different for an average person than, you know, sending a digital asset on a blockchain from my wallet to your wallet, right? The fact that the underlying technology and the underlying consequences of that technology are far different does not really make a difference for my experience, because there is today trading in Counter-Strike for gaming skins, right? Even though it's not actually, you know, technically legal, and there's no infrastructure to support that in the games in terms of real monetization. People have just built systems around that to make it happen. But because of that, they don't significantly experience it any different. You know, if tomorrow, for example, this would be interesting. Let's say that this, I don't know which studio is behind Counter-Strike, but let's say that the gaming studio, I always forget, but let's say that that gaming studio decided tomorrow, is it Valve? Let's say they decided tomorrow, okay, we're going to take all the skins back. And people just lose their €2 million or 200,000 euro skin, then there would be a riot. And then suddenly people would realize, holy shit, I am not actually the one who owns this stuff. And then maybe they might be like, okay, maybe you should transition to Web3 games. But because the reality is that they're not really experiencing the negative downsides most of the time, and because most of them have grown up expecting nothing out of a gaming world in the sense of
monetary value,
of monetary value, they don't really feel that there's an issue. So that's on that side, you're right. On the other side, and now I'm going to say something that's probably not going to be very popular with the Web3 people, is I truly believe that all of this is part of a transitional phase. It might sound completely bonkers to a lot of people, but I am convinced that within, say, 40 years, at the very least, we'll be living in a kind of Star Trek post-World War III world where there's no real money. There's no real ownership anymore. Because the idea of ownership and the idea of property and is also something that is very recent. People think that, you know, this is super important, especially in the United States. You know, your personal sovereignty, your privacy, and your property are like super important ideas. But ultimately, these are less than 10,000 years old. And like I told you, humanity has been around for 200,000 years. And for the most part of that time, so, more than 90% of that time, we didn't have personal property either. Not in the sense that we have it today. Of course, you might be a hunter-gatherer and you might have a necklace or, or a weapon that you used every day that people knew that, that was the weapon that you always used. But the sense of property, right, and the value of that was very differently perceived than it is today. I mean, basically, we lived in communities mostly, and whatever we made was owned by the community, but we didn't even think about that. There was not that concept of I own this and you own that didn't exist like that for the most part of our history. And I think that now we're in a transitional phase where, yes, Web3 will allow us to bring value and ownership and persistent identity and all of that good stuff to the digital realm, because it's essential, because we have that in the physical world today. But ultimately, another few decades from now, there will be such abundance, and this has a lot to do with AI and the exponential development of technology. The abundance will be such that there will be no real reason to think about property in the same way as we do today. And when I say that, I mean, there will be no more, lawsuits on copyright or things like that. People will have their own home. And, they will expect that other people don't come in their home and sleep in that home, for example. And people will have access to things that they use on a daily basis. But the idea of I own this and you own that, and we can fight over, this land or this property will not be something that I believe exists anymore, because we will come into an age where that's no longer necessary, because the scarcity, which is what has driven this, will be gone.
It's interesting that you said that, because before, when we arranged this episode, I texted a big chat of a bunch of colleagues that I'm kind of a bit closer with, and I was like, guys, what is the most futuristic thing that you can think of? Because I was like, I just want to hear other people's ideas. I have mine, but I just want to hear what is the most batshit crazy thing. And I was just like, give me funny examples, give me tragic examples, give me absolutely ludicrous ones. So one of the guys, Plamen, oh God, his was so funny. So he was just kind of like, you know what? Lately, I've been increasingly concerned with, on a literal level, non-metaphorically, what will be the currency of the future? What are we going to use as money? Because he's like, we already know from crypto that people are moving away from fiat, from that kind of thing. And perhaps more even into assets. But then he wrote, the very idea of being somewhere out in space, negotiating with Earth on how you send a ton of diamonds or other precious resources back to Earth, only if they pay you in a transparent and secure manner that will definitely reach you all the way out in space, fits perfectly into my futuristic visions for future generations. So he's just kind of like the very concept of thinking about some kind of monetary transfer between Earth and other planets and stuff. And he's like, people will be people. People are going to want to get paid for, the labor that they do and stuff. It's very interesting. But yeah, so I was going to ask you, so you think there won't be a currency of the future, answering Plumman's burning concern? Because we won't have scarcity.
Won't be any currency. No, there won't be any currency, because, that idea only holds when there's scarcity. And as we are seeing today, let's be honest, what are we seeing today? We're seeing artificial intelligence rise like a rocket, like a Falcon 9 going straight vertically up into the sky, being capable of doing tasks that up until a year and a half ago, it was unfathomable that this was something that an artificial intelligence could do. We're seeing robotics, which has been in development for years, but they're going around the same exponential path. We're seeing robotics, and anybody that's been paying attention this year, robotics are skyrocketing. We're going from funny videos from Boston Robotics and Dynamics about their robots being able to do a backflip. Are we suddenly going to multiple companies around the world launching massive projects to develop robots that can do what any human can do in terms of factory work, transportation, all of that?
Here
that goes
I have
together with the development.
here I have like a really good counter to, I think there will be a currency of the future, but that currency isn't going to be monetary or asset based. Like the asset is going to be a little bit different. And I read this in an article. It was a Wired piece about why the workforce is going to need humans more than ever, despite all of these robots that can do anything, like all that grunt work, all of the AI that can do even the mental grunt work. And I was sitting there thinking of like, okay, but you know, what are the most fundamentally human things? Where do we differ from AI? And I was like, okay, well, first we have emotions, which, you know, AI can't have right now. We've got a physical body, biological body that allows us to have, hang on. Hear me out. This is a long story. And then we have an inherent ability to have ideas. Because I did a ChatGPT experiment yesterday. I sat down and I was like, okay, so Elon has been bragging last week that they implanted a Neuralink chip into a human brain. And I was like, okay, great. Cool. So that's essentially allowing, their goal is to allow a person to move a cursor just using the intention of their brain. Like this is, I think, BCI, so the brain computer idea. And that's great, right? And that's essentially telekinesis. Telekinesis, like that's been something that has been a source, like something that some human or group or whoever imagined a very long time ago. And it's just kind of been like this science fiction thing, right? So I was like, okay, I asked ChatGPT, how can we achieve telekinesis? And it gave me, actually gave me Neuralink as an example and a couple more. And I was like, okay, let's try something a little bit that hasn't already, been in front of my eyes and my face. And I'm just like, we haven't already kind of figured it out. So I was like, how are we going to achieve teleportation? And it gave me 5 options again, and all 5 of them were things that I'd effectively heard of before. It was like quantum transportation, wormholes, that kind of thing. It even gave me Star Trek as an example where, they kind of like disembody their material body and then they put it back together on the other end. And I was like, okay, but ChatGPT can't have new ideas and humans can. So my theory is I think the currency of the future is going to be imagination. That's the asset. And that's what we're going to be buying and selling is each other's imagination, each other's ideas.
What version of ChatGPT did you use?
This is a very good question. Let me see. I think I just used the newest one. I don't know. We have like a paid account. Just 4.
Yeah, but you did use the paid version.
Yes, we have a paid account.
Okay, cool, that's good.
I love how this turned into like a grilling. The free version is...
Look, I think that, look, I'm trying to find a way to say this without coming across rude. But what you're saying is just not true. So you said I had a conversation with ChatGPT and the answers I got are answers that I already heard of. But that is not statistically relevant. That is not proof.
No, but it's not about me. It's about the fact that those answers already exist, in the human realm. It's about the fact that those answers already exist in the human realm.
But you're making a cognitive bias now. You're having confirmation bias. You started with the idea, let's see if ChatGPT can tell me something I didn't know that is original and creative. And then when you didn't get an answer that you didn't know about, you kind of took that as, it doesn't have proof. But if you'd had the same conversation with a human being, the chances of you hearing something that you'd never heard of before would also be pretty much 0.
Yeah, but the point isn't about
99.999% of
whether I've heard it before or not. It's about whether it's something that humanity has already invented and thought of, because I don't know anything about quantum transportation, right?
Here you go. But here you go. You're talking about it's whether humanity already invented it or not.
Yeah.
So you're comparing all of humanity, 8 billion people, and all of their capabilities, and then you're saying, well, this one AI model can't do anything better than that. Let me put it differently. There's already proof. There's simple proof. There are many papers proving by extreme testing that AI, the current models, GPT-4 and GPT-4.5 Turbo and others, are capable of coming up with creative solutions that far exceed human capabilities. Both mathematical proofs, which is one of the trying areas because the current models, a lot of them have trouble with mathematics for technical reasons I'm not going to go into now. But there's also proof. Like, for example, these models, the new AI models, have come up with 100 million new materials. So they've basically generated the formulas for new materials that we can use in technology that no human had come up with before. We've developed more, or we've rediscovered more than 48 million new protein structures, which can help us to beat cancer and fight all kinds of diseases, etc. AI did that, not a human did that.
Based on what we already fed it, right? So basically, what I understand is that we're feeding it some information. We're feeding it like the initial, this is how far we are. And it's just like, okay, look, I can build on this like this. And like, is that what you're saying? It's like, it's built on all of that already in terms of science. Right?
And humans don't do the same.
Well,
humans
we're just
are
slow.
Babies that fall out.
We're just slow.
We fall out of the womb. Yeah, but we do the same thing. Like, it's not like a human baby falls out of the womb and comes up with a creative new theory.
Yeah. Okay.
It spends its entire life learning. And then it combines whatever it's learned into a new combination of things, leading to a realization about the world. That's exactly what AI is doing.
Okay, I'm going to say you semi-convinced me here in that, like, I can see what you mean about, like, the input that it's had. It's, like, exponentially grown it a lot faster than humanity, like, than one human brain could ever get. I'm not sure to what extent I would qualify that as a new idea, but I do understand what you mean in that, like, it's new solutions that we haven't thought of because we're humans and, like, we're just biological and we're slow. Yeah. And I was just thinking about how, like, I think
so it's a biological calculation.
Yeah, we're a different machine. We're a biological machine, and I just think we have like a different amount of capabilities. And since we're the biological machine that is trying to live in this world, I think that
but then what makes an emotion? Because if I talk to Lex Friedman or Mark Zuckerberg, they barely show any emotion. I mean, people make
that
fun
doesn't
of
mean
them
that they don't
every day
have
for that.
any. Everybody has emotions.
Exactly. That means they don't have any. So how do you know AI doesn't have an emotion? Just because you don't see it on the surface?
So I personally think that emotions are a biological thing. And we haven't gotten to the point where like mechanical technology has those biological reactions.
How do you know that?
I just think we're not there yet.
You think we're not there
because
yet?
I think it's biological. And that the electronics don't have that. That's what I personally think. That I think maybe it comes to the fact that we're not at it's not a most advanced enough machine, because I think the human brain is a very, very advanced machine, and that's why it has these sensors, so to speak. So I think that's where it's still not enough.
If you're saying that, then basically you agree with me, because my point of view is that humans are just biological machines. We are very complicated algorithms. We are extremely slow, but we are extremely complex, and we are capable of very impressive parallel processing. And artificial intelligence is the same thing. It's just at this point in time, it's still a simpler version of the same thing. And if we look at the trajectory of development of AI, where 2 decades ago it didn't exist at all, and today we are already exceeding human capabilities in more than 100 different fields and skill sets, etc., then if you just look at the trajectory, it's very obvious that within the next 2 decades, we'll have an AI that will exceed humans in every single way. And that is not limited to anything. The creativity will be part of that, because creativity is just an algorithmic processing of information and data.
I'm okay with creativity, but so you're saying basically that you don't think. My question was like, do you think imagination will be the currency of the future? So you don't agree with that because you think that AI is going to like completely like blow us out.
I think AI is already. I think AI is already more imaginative than we are.
Let's say you've convinced me, actually, but I have a different theory now. What if happiness is the currency of the future? Because you think that AI could potentially have emotions if we develop it further, right? If we make it into a more complex machine, and especially with organ printing and everything, because we're getting to the point where I think we're going to be able to print organs and things for people who need them and stuff. So we could potentially, I think, make a biological machine as well. Like probably exponentially fast. Yeah,
we already have. They already made. They made a like they how do you say this? They grew cells, and they made a biological artificial intelligence out of that.
Whoa!
And
Where?
in the next
Wait.
few years, that technology.
Give me the example. I want to read about this. Do you remember? Do you remember the name?
I have to look.
You have to look. Okay.
No, but I can look it up for you. I can send it to you for the show notes.
Yeah, we can put them in the show notes.
That's no problem.
Do you think though?
Okay, but
we're gonna like that's the direction we want to go in, because I feel like our ultimate, like, I don't know, prerogative as human beings in the world is to feel good, to be happy, to enjoy our lives, right? So if imagination isn't going to be the currency of the future, what if it's happiness? So is it like even our prerogative to create a biological AI, like something that can basically mimic us in every way, and then especially, I don't know, effectively enslave it so that we can just be happy? Or are we going to keep things kind of, because I know there's a lot of concern with like the ethics of AI. Are we going to keep it to like a certain norm? It's like, okay, let's keep it mechanical so that, you know, we don't develop this creation to the point where it would suffer or basically be enslaved. We keep it mechanical so it can do all our processes, and like basically it can grow humanity and everything so we can be happier. Once again, getting to emotions and being biological beings.
Yeah, this is, and again, I mean, what is happiness? I mean, how would you, if you, I mean, there's this one example that they sometimes use about the risk of artificial intelligence. And they say, well, look, if we just tell artificial intelligence, this is about the alignment problem, right? One of the big problems of our artificial intelligence towards the future is that we want artificial intelligence interests to be aligned with our own, because ultimately, you know, artificial intelligence will be far more capable and stronger and smarter in every way than us. And so we need to make sure that its goals align with ours. And then people said, well, you know, just tell it to make sure that humans are happy. Well, then artificial intelligence, you know, in a sci-fi future could just say, well, I'm going to take all humans, put them in pods, inject them with MDMA all day long so they feel extremely happy and in ecstasy, and that's it, done. But is that happiness? Is that happiness? No.
It's the chemical reaction of happiness. The life is what we want.
Exactly. And so the reality of today is, and this is something that's been known for thousands of years to the Stoics and all the wise Asian men like Lao Tzu, etc., is that happiness is only achieved through adversity. You need to actually experience. You need to experience negativity, and you need to have, you know, challenges in life to be able to experience what it means to be happy. So what is happiness then? And how would that be a currency? And then,
I think we mean metaphorically currency, you know, the thing that we're effectively striving for. Because I feel like there's such a strife for wealth, for money right now. And I just think we have it all ass backwards. Oops. You know, it just doesn't make sense that so many people are so geared towards money. And I feel like, you know, this is why you see so many people kind of stepping off like the, you know, the big hamster wheel career path, because there's like, you know, screw this. This is not what makes my life good. I can work. I can have adversity in different ways. I can make myself better in different ways. I don't need that much, you know, money, because I can make myself better and I can be happier otherwise.
I think that in the future, what will be really important, and which will be, and comes back to one of the questions you sent me prior, I think the biggest challenge for us will be to rediscover what it means to be fulfilled in life. Because in today's world, most people are not fulfilled, and most people are as a result of not being fulfilled because they don't feel they have.
They're trying to survive
worthwhile with their lives.
I think it's because we're trying.
Happy.
Yeah, I think, you know what? It comes back to what you said earlier. You think there won't be the scarcity, you know, the scarcity of property, of land, of food, all of this kind of stuff, right? So when you remove that scarcity, when people aren't trying to literally survive, I think that's when we're going to hit an existential crisis as humanity and be like, what's going to make me fulfilled? Because right now I feel like most people, once they are okay and they know they're going to survive, that's when they hit that crisis. So I think we're moving towards that as humanity. We need to redefine that.
Yeah, but maybe I don't know if I'm understanding you correctly, but I would say that in today's world, most people are unfulfilled. Most people only do what they need to do to survive.
Exactly what I'm saying.
So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So cool. Then cool. Then we're on the same page.
You read me loud and clear.
But I would argue that if we go 200,000 years back in time, from what we know, I mean, we can't be 100% certain, right? We weren't there, but from what we can tell, also from current, for example, tribes that still live in the savannas and in the Amazon, etc. What we can tell is that a lot of these people are relatively happy and fulfilled because they live in a very small world, in a society, community, with people around them that they care about. and they have something to do every day, but they also have a great degree of freedom because they don't have to show up at their job at 9 o'clock, and they don't have to worry about paying their taxes and their income and all of the kind of challenges that modern day life throws at us, which puts a lot of people in a kind of cage where we are forced to do a lot of things we don't want, that don't make us happy, just because that is what's necessary to be able to survive in today's world. I think that although 200,000 years ago, we still had to worry about surviving because we had to get food and we had to not be eaten by saber-toothed tigers, right?
Yeah. We've eliminated this now in exchange for, the whole monetary system and social systems.
Yeah, but I
we're still surviving,
but I foresee a future where in like 20, well, let's say 40 years, we will be for the first time in a place where we don't need to worry about saber-toothed tigers, but we also don't need to worry about paying taxes and going to work. And I think that the biggest challenge will be for people to make that transition, to find then purpose in life. But ultimately, I think a lot of us will find that we can have an amazing life if we just have our biological organic garden outside and we go and tend our tomatoes in the morning and we go for a nice walk with our loved ones in the afternoon and we read a good book and we write our own theories about life, knowing that there's an artificial intelligence mind out there that's probably 100 times smarter than us. It doesn't matter because ultimately the real value of our ideas is in our own experience of them and them sharing them with the people that we respect and care about, rather than having a theory that is blowing away the universe.
I kind of feel like this comes back to the imagination thing, though, because I feel like what you're saying again is that we're going to come back to this value of like valuing our own individual imagination, our own little world, the microcosm that's our mind, our human ideas, even though there's an AI that can, yes, have ideas. I agree with you now. It's going to take me a little more, I guess, work to find the information on the models that are advanced enough to do that, because I don't necessarily think that the GPT-4 that the masses are using is we're not being given, I think, that power just yet, because the ones that we're using right now are not the ones that do that. Anyway, that's a different thing. But I think it comes back to the thing about like imagination being the valuable asset, and like our human imagination and human ideas becoming this like scarce little asset that we all learn to appreciate and be fulfilled by. I think that's what I meant by that question. But so I think we've come back full circle, to be honest. But I want to ask you. Okay, wait.
Yeah,
respond
I would
first.
agree with you. I would agree with you. Yes, I believe that AI will ultimately be able to outperform us in everything, but I also don't think that really matters, right? But right now, we're still living in a world where people are very hung up on the idea of being the apex predator. I call this human exceptionalism, and I talk about it a lot. The idea is so strongly ingrained in our modern culture, the way we think, but also the way, like everything. Like, look at Christianity. Christianity is the idea that we are created in the image of God. Islam is the same thing, right? Judaism is still about us being the special chosen ones of God. But basically every religion in the world today, except for the religions that we have written off as, heathenistic, old-fashioned kind of superstition in nature's gods, etc., but they all put us, humanity, on a pedestal where we're the best, we're the supreme creation, and we outperform everything else in nature by a significant margin. But the truth is that now we are going to come to an age where we realize that this is not the case. It's never been the case. And we need to come to grips with that. And that's going to be the biggest challenge of this century, to come to grips with the idea that ultimately we need to find happiness and self-worth, even knowing that individually our lives are basically just a piece of dust in a massive universe where we are not per se essential or absolutely, the best of the best. But there's nothing wrong with that. I think that will be very healthy return to what we knew already hundreds of thousands of years ago, when we were still more in line with Mother Nature and we understood that we were just a part of a grander system.
I feel like it also... I feel like this process has already started, because the thing I mentioned earlier about so many people leaving the hamster wheel that is, like the late capitalist career situation, where, people are working their asses off in office and stuff. I see so many people leaving and, going to therapy and being like, yeah, you know what, my life is a lot smaller. I'm this tiny, like I'm so insignificant. But then they end up kind of content in that, they're just like, I'm just living my life for the experience of it, for what it gives me, even though it's this teeny little thing, it's minuscule. But so I do get that. But you mentioned your, just kind of looping back to what I was going to say earlier, because you were talking about, tending our little bio garden, like just writing our own little novel and our thoughts and, being with our families, that kind of thing. How does that tie in with this like big virtual augmented reality that, we're going to live in that we were talking about earlier? How do those two coexist in your ideas of the future?
Well, I think ultimately what's also going to happen is that we're going to merge with technology, right? I'm pretty convinced of this.
Well, Neuralink, example.
We are all going to be cyborgs, and in some way we already are.
Yeah, I mean the joint replacements, all of that, pacemakers, that's technology inside us.
Exactly. Great examples. But beyond that, we're already, you already said it. You literally said it. You said, what is a phone? Is a brain? No, you talked about brain-computer interfaces, Neuralink.
Yeah,
yes.
PCI.
But what is a phone? What is a phone? What is a mobile phone other than a brain-computer interface? It's just a non-invasive brain-computer interface because it's not built into your brain. But you use it to augment your intelligence. You use it to augment your memory. You use it you keep memories in greater detail than you could keep them in your normal mind, at least most people. You use it to communicate over vast different distances. You use it to enhance your computational power of your brain. Right, so it's just the first step in brain-computer interfacing, and all of us, 8 billion of us, carry one around every day, all day, and it connects us to the hive mind, which is the internet. So, in a real sense, we are already turning into the Borg, hopefully a better version of them. But and that trend that's just going to continue. There's no reason to think that will stop, and ultimately, I think we'll be better for it because I believe that when in earlier ages we were aware of our connection to nature and our part in the system, and we've kind of lost that as a result of technology. But now technology will put us back into a place where we can kind of reinvent that connection to the world in an even more more impactful way, so to speak. But
yeah, I definitely agree that we're moving away from the object-based computer, the computer, the phone, even the VR headsets. Like, I don't think that's what we're going to have. I'm much more a fan of okay, so I'm definitely creeped out by the Neuralink thing. Trust me, I know about the scandal with the suffering chimps and stuff. I'm very scared of that. I've said this so many times on this podcast. Elon Musk gives me anxiety, but that's just because he's a little bit brash. And yeah, but anyway, the cyborg situation, I feel like the cyborgism, if we can talk about it that way. Like, my dad wears a hearing aid and he has a joke that he's a cyborg because he can switch his ears off when my mom's getting on his nerves. It's great.
Well, technically he is,
but technically I think what's going to happen is we're going to remove all of this technology, like the cameras in front of my face, the microphone in front of my mouth, and we're just going to be living in a more a world that we can make nicer, more natural, so to speak, and we can be more in touch with our bodies, even if we have something ingrained in them. And I think that's better because right now, we're living like this in front of a computer, whereas suddenly we'll be living like this. And I have this issue. This is why I think augmented reality is where we're going rather than virtual reality, because with virtual reality, say now you're in VR and everyone can go to the NBA game, the whole 7 billion people in the world, and they're all on their headsets. But I believe there's something about, so there's a theory of affect. I don't know, I didn't really mention my background earlier, but I studied actually theater, and theater is a live art form. I also dance. So I'm so much in my actual physical body all the time that I'm bothered by technology tearing me away from that, because that's what brings me happiness. Dancing, being in a performance and being super immersed in it. And there's a theory of hang on, I have it in my drawer because I also pulled this from my archive. It's paper, oh my God. What the heck? And it's about affect, so I'm gonna link this also in the show notes. So it's The Affect Theory Reader by Melissa Gregg and Gregory Sigworth. So it's just a very useful resource. So affect is something that happens between bodies. They can be non-human bodies as well, but it's something effectively like an energy, a feeling that you get. And I don't think that VR, if you're in the NBA game and all your friends are around you, there's a crowd of 1,000 people screaming and everything. With the VR glasses, there was a guy called Marquise Brownlee who reviewed the Apple Vision Pro, for example, and he was just kind of you're not actually seeing through the glass, right? You know, it's the cameras that are showing you a very good mimesis of that. It's mimesis. It's not what you're seeing. And I think the brain knows the difference. Like our little biological supercomputer knows the difference, and the affect that we get from that is very different. So the affect we're getting from people in VR that we see, and no matter how like realistic it is very different from when they're physically around us. I think that's biology again. That's like the pheromones flying around and stuff. So unless we can like simulate pheromones in VR, I think it could be possible. But so that's why I think it's going to be AR, because AR is going to allow us to be in our bodies and remove all of this like tech clutter that's holding us back without actually removing the technology.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. So first of all, at the CES in 2022, they introduced a machine that you could use with a VR headset, which can generate 68 different smells. So that means that the whole,
like I said, pheromones probably possible.
Yeah, so the quest of introducing more senses to the experience is already underway. So that's one thing. So ultimately, I mean, 10, 20 years down the line, I have absolutely no doubt that we'll be able to do a fairly good job of that. And by the end of this century, which is still a long time, I realize that, but by the end of this century, we will be able to recreate any reality, including pheromones and all of that, you know, in a virtual way.
Like recreate the bodies, essentially, in every sensory way and trick the mind.
Yeah, which brings us to kind of simulation theory, right? Where the idea is that we're already living in a simulation. We just don't know it. And we might be in the simulation of the simulation of the simulation of the simulation of the simulation.
But what does that matter, you know? Does that matter?
It doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter at all. Exactly. So, I mean, it doesn't matter to me. So I believe that virtual reality and augmented reality have different use cases. And I think that initially we'll see them be separated. I think that for day-to-day use, for a lot of people, augmented reality will be once we break certain technological obstacles that we have today. But once we get past those, I think it's very likely that we'll see that completely replacing, or at least very, very significantly augmenting our use of mobile phones or smartphones, right? So I agree with you there, but I also think that virtual reality will have its use case.
I do
once
too.
It becomes less,
like definitely for trainings or even work.
I mean, even today is being used. I mean, we have several firefighter departments in the Netherlands that do all of their training in virtual reality, because that allows them to take a VR headset home and they don't need to have the whole fire truck at home to practice on how to use a fire truck, right? The use cases are so clear and obviously valuable, and it's just a matter of becoming more mainstream. And there's many of examples of that. So I think that both have a very significant role to play in the years to come. Both of them will grow, become more accepted. So I don't think, but ultimately, I'm 100% convinced that we'll go into kind of matrix scenario. Literally a matrix scenario where we'll have a chip in our brain and we will just change realities. So we'll switch from physical reality to mental reality. And in mental reality, we'll have a lot more freedom because we'll be, fully in control of that world, which might even lead to us at some point deciding to become completely digitized, which then ties into what Ray Kurzweil said, is that ultimately traveling through space and the universe poses so many problems for a biological body that there might be no reason to hang on to those if we can change it to complete technology. And then there's people that say, well, that's not natural, and that's not this, and that's not that, and it's scary. But I think it's perfectly natural because we are humans and we are natural.
We're natural and we created all of this, yeah. Yeah, I have a similar thing. Otherwise, that was very altered carbon of you. You talked about basically like the concept of what is consciousness and, what are you? Because I think everybody knows at this point, we're not exactly our bodies, but we haven't found a way to separate ourselves from our bodies completely enough so far. And then how do we do that? And then there's, altered carbon with the stacks and all. And that. I think that was a very interesting commentary. And that's how they jump planets essentially as well. That's exactly what you were saying. It's not a problem for something that's, I don't want to say digital because is it? But I agree with the AR and VR. Like I'm personally more for the AR thing as a person who's just like I'm very connected to my body, like my biological body. I'm that person. That's just me. But I never even like enjoyed playing a lot of computer games and stuff. Like I did did a little bit, but like all those virtual reality was like, I want to go outside. Like that was the first thing. I was like, I want to go outside and take a run or something. And I know a lot of people aren't like that. And I do see that VR having its like practical purposes for like training us up for certain scenarios, or you just being useful the same way a Google Meet is useful now because we can all work remotely, or Slack is useful now. I think that like VR is just perfect for that because you can have like an international office, for example.
But I do think it's interesting because I used to be a believer very strongly in like consciousness resides in the mind, and you know that includes maybe the brainstem, etc. But I have seen a lot of research in recent years that is proving that there is a very strong connection between the rest of our body, specifically our gut and our brain.
Yeah,
and what goes on in our brain is influenced. Yeah, what goes on in our brain is influenced by what's going on in our butt, in our gut. Sorry, in our butt. For some people, that's also true. And then I saw this research recently from Nadeem Khan in Toronto, who's a very well-respected stem cell researcher, doctor. Well, I just want to say he developed a pill. He developed a pill that will come into the market next year that you can take to get some part of your microbiome to change your metabolism. And he also developed a therapy which is called a peptide injection for the vagus nerve, which is one injection to reset the autonomous nervous system, and it completely helps people that have serious traumatic emotional
like
problems or blockages. So yeah, like exactly. So that shows us that part of our personality is not in our brain, it's in the rest of our body. So that then brings the challenge to the table for this kind of consciousness being digitized in the future. How does that work then if it's not simply something that sits here in the brain, but it's part of our whole biological body? And if we start replacing parts, how will that work out? So,
well, you know, there's all those stories about like, you know, people who get transplants. There's all this theory. There was a Netflix series about this. It's called The Marked Heart. I think it's Latin American, maybe Argentinian, but yeah, it's Palpito. So anyway, she gets a heart transplant, and then she starts having like memories of the woman, you know, that she got the heart transplant from. But anyway, this is like a little bit sci-fi and like, yeah. But I'm interested in that very much. But since we are kind of coming up to time, I had like one question that I really wanted to ask you because, you know, we've got all this AI. We've got even like, was it Google that had the glasses that could like automatically translate what people are saying in real time and stuff? And I think, you know, all these glasses, the Ray-Bans by Meta have like an open ear speaker and all of that stuff. So at what point, you know, in our educational systems, do we actually introduce things like that kind of glasses? Like, to what extent do we give kids AI? You know, when do we give them these tools? Because obviously, even right now, we know we don't give a 5-year-old a calculator because we want it to understand some basic math before we let it just do its thing, because it's like brain development. So when do you think we should introduce AI? Not when in terms of like human history, but when in terms of like a person's life do we introduce AI and I guess like also all sorts of like language learning help and all of these help, like the augmented bit?
Yeah, that's a very good question and a very relevant question. I would say that the question is not when do we introduce it. The question is when do we start teaching our children the relevance of having the right hygiene and mindset towards using technology. I think this is something that we've been lacking. I mean, yes, we introduced the calculator and we don't teach children in primary school to use a calculator so that they can get the basics right, and they don't really realize they're missing it because nobody told them about a calculator yet. But the honest truth, of course, is that what would be even better is that we start teaching them at an early age the importance of dealing with technology in the right way and having kind of control over it, because it taps into our most instinctual brain by
like Instagram with the dopamine machine.
Reward centers. Yeah, the dopamine machine, reward centers. And I think this is something that is really gone wrong with the introduction of social media and internet, is that we weren't aware of these risks. And as a result, we've created a generation that has now the highest levels of anxiety as we've ever seen in any generation, because they're continuously on social media, looking at fake realities by other people that are simply only portraying the best parts of their life, making it seem like that is the standard, therefore making everybody looking at it and seeing it continuously unhappy with their own lives because they think that their lives are crap. So what we should have done is we should have taught all of these people, these young people at an early age, that social media is not reality, and that you should not spend most of your time on social media, but that you should spend most of your time doing worthwhile things, and that you should not post on social media all kinds of nonsense that, but we haven't. And that's a problem. If we go into this now with artificial intelligence, we need to start reforming our educational systems around the world today to teach children two things. One, technology hygiene. How do you properly use modern technology to stay healthy, right? Just like we teach them how to eat healthy, or at least we should be teaching them how to eat healthy. Not everybody and everywhere does that either, but okay. And then the second thing is we should teach them epistemology. This should be a required subject in every school, the ability to separate fact from fiction. How do you do that? What is the process? What is the first thought that should come to mind when you're presented with a new piece of information? Because right now, what we see, we don't just see this in the young generation, because my mother of 78 does the same thing, because she also doesn't really understand the internet and technology. She sees something online and her brain kind of accepts that as real. She doesn't really think that a lot of the stuff that she sees might be fake, or might be a lie, or might be, untrustworthy. It's just not her nature, because she hasn't been taught how to deal with this kind of barrage of information where 99% of it is untrustworthy.
Yeah, like fake information that we are not used to disseminating out of.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. So you don't think there's a specific age? It's more like we need to, because I do agree, like most people, when ChatGPT started like being more mainstream and people started being able to use it, I think people are using it really wrong. I think they're using it to like just do my work for me so that I never have to actually learn these skills, rather than help me learn these skills really, really fast and be really efficient doing anything that's distracting me from learning these skills. I think we're just using it wrong. So yeah, you think it's about educating them to like properly be able to function. Interesting.
I read a research paper this morning, or well, not the whole paper, but the summary, and it basically showed that children of about 6 months old can already differentiate when they're listening to people talking in the room. They can differentiate between people talking a foreign language or people talking the native language of their parents. And that influences how their brains start to structure, how their neural pathways are developing, which is why children that grow up bilingual with multiple languages from early age on already have significant different brain development, which is actually very beneficial to them compared to children that grow up with one language.
I've read a lot about that, yeah.
6 months. Yeah, this is at 6 months old, right? So if at that age, children are already being so significantly impacted by what they hear and see around them, and you then come to the conclusion that in today's world, technology is ever more, ubiquitous and everywhere, then how can we say, well, we need to wait until they're 7 years old before we start to teach them what is fundamentally necessary for them to operate in that world? We can't. We need to find ways to expose them to this at an early age in a way that doesn't interfere in a negative way with their development process, but also positively stimulates them to develop the right kind of skill set and mental capacity to deal with the world that they're going to be living in. And this is something that I think the educational system today is completely failing at.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're still teaching children in the same ways 100 years ago for a world as it existed 100 years ago.
You know, a really good example about the education thing as well. My piano teacher when I was a kid, she was like, I actually teach a lot of kids that have speech disabilities or issues with their speech, like a stammer or something, because apparently learning to play the piano, moving the fine motorics of the hands is connected inside the brain with the development of speech. And it helps them either get over the problem or improve or, whatever the individual situation is. And she's like, it's the same as the reason that they teach children to write with a pencil. And that's why we don't introduce typing immediately or tapping on the phone, because learning to use the fine motorics of your hands improves your speech. So when you're 4, 5, 6 years old learning to write, and you're still, kind of semi in between the baby talk and, speaking like a normal person, that's, I think, why people they start writing, and that this improves a lot suddenly. So it's very interesting.
It is. You're making such an interesting point here, because that's actually something. Writing is a psychoneural, motor kind of thing that has a significant impact on your thinking process. And we're stopping writing. Like we're writing less and less and less. I mean, I never write anymore personally.
Me too.
But yeah.
Anyway, I always open the floor to my guests at the end to, I don't know, put out their message to people, any last thoughts that they have, things that they want our listeners to remember out of this whole big episode.
I think the most important thing to remember is that whether you like what's happening in the world with technology or not, you need to be realistic about the chances of that you being able to escape it, and not just you, but your children as well. If you are not properly preparing yourself and your children for the realistic future that is ahead, then you're doing them a disservice and yourself. And I think that anybody that looks at the development of technology over the past 3 decades can already see the very clear trend that technological progress is accelerating. There used to be one scientific breakthrough a year in the 90s, and now we're at one scientific breakthrough every week, right? This is a fact. This is not nonsense. So ask yourself, what does that mean for you? And secondly, in what's happening right now with artificial intelligence, anybody that's using the free version of ChatGPT is really putting themselves at a disadvantage. And they have no idea what real AI can do. So go and get a subscription. And I'm not even paid for that.
Well, it's been a really stimulating conversation, so thank you so much. So that was everything for today, guys. And I hope you had a good time listening to this episode. I know it was a long one, but I think there was just so much ground to cover. And we'll see you in the next episode of The Social Block. Bye.